Hey guys, welcome back to a new video. Today's video is a bit different. We are starting a new series on our channel which is called Cleaning Gaming PCs. Today will be Season 1, Episode 1. Let's get started by deassembling the computer. Starting with the graphics card. Removing all cables, unscrewing the screw that attaches the GPU to the case and pulling it right out. Removing all the cables from the motherboard, including the motherboard power, CPU power and any additional fan. Unscrewing the motherboard from the case. Gently removing the motherboard from the case. Moving on to the power supply. Started by removing the back panel of the case, detangling the wires, bringing them all the way to the back, easier to remove. Unscrewing the power supply from the case, sliding the power supply out of the case, by not forgetting the I/O shield. Removing the two screws that attach the fan to the case. Removing the CD drive. Sliding the CD drive out. Opening the case on its back in order to remove the front panel, removing the filter, also removing the fan that was right behind it. Now removing the front ports. You can see, starting from the case, we stripped it to bare bones. This is the front ports. As you can see, the wiring right behind it, the two case fans, the filter and the front. So first of all, we're going to start washing and detailing these parts first, and then we'll be moving on to stripping down the motherboard, CPU, RAM and the power supply. So let's get right into it. Now going outside, I've decided to hose down the case and it had a lot of grime stuck on the surface. Also by using a rag to scrub the areas that has tough grime that is not easy to remove. Also washing the filter in the front panel. Now moving on to deassembling the motherboard. Removing the RAM stick that came with the build. Now by removing the CPU cooler, it helps us to gain access to the CPU. Right now I'm removing the old crusty thermal paste. Starting by unscrewing the backplate, removing the backplate from the GPU. Onto the back side of the graphics card, removing all the 4 screws attached to heatsink to the graphics card. Now revealing the graphics card's internals. Next removing the GPU fans, which are attached by 3 screws on each side. And removing the fan shroud from the heatsink. Also removing the thermal paste from the heatsink and the GPU die. Now onto the power supply. Now removing the 4 screws that attaches the fan shroud fan to the power supply cover. Now removing the screws from the power supply cover. And finally remove the fan from the power supply. To the next clip, which will be blowing out all the dust. So see you then. Starting by blowing the dust off the motherboard, digging through with a brush, preparing for the deep clean process. Moving on to the GPU fan shroud and the VRM's plate, giving it a basic over onto the graphics card by using the brush going everywhere as much as possible. Moving on to the GPU heatsink, blowing off as much as I can onto the GPU backplate. Onto the main unit, the power supply, blowing the internals, making sure I get every angle. To the GPU fans, giving them a basic run over, getting them ready for the toothbrush process. Onto the 2 case fans, same applies from the GPU fans onto this. The CD drive and power supply cover, giving it a basic run over. Now that all the blowing process is complete, now we're going to be moving on to the deep cleaning process, where we deep clean every single part, every square inch, as much as possible. Give it a brand new look. Spraying the cloth, wiping down the surface area of the power supply. Also wiping down the SSD and the RAM stick cover. Now bringing out the toothbrush, spraying a little bit onto the toothbrush to get into the fan blades, making sure I'm covering every area as much as possible. VRM plate, a basic run over with a toothbrush. The CD drive, wiping it down with a bit of spray. Now bringing back the toothbrush out to brush down the GPU area. Using the brush enables me to get every area as much as possible, using isopropyl alcohol to make the procedure easier. Giving the CPU a basic clean, also the motherboard using the same toothbrush, same isopropyl alcohol, scrubbing all the areas. The CPU fan and the two case fans, bringing in the toothbrush once again, using a bit of spray to get all the blades, covering as much surface areas as possible, give it the brand new look. Also not forgetting the ports that were attached to the case, which we did remove, and also scrubbing down the GPU fan shroud. The rest of these we're going to be washing them in water. Since it's pretty much more easier, we just wash them and then we just let them dry off the side. This will be done off camera. Since everything's done, back from the washing process, now we're going to be reassembling the GPU and the power supply right now. So let's get into it. Starting with attaching the fans to the GPU heatsink, screwing the fans onto the heatsink. After doing so, I routed the wires so the fans don't clip onto it. Bringing in the fan shroud, screwing on the fan shroud to the heatsink of the GPU, a total of 4 screws. Moving on to the actual GPU itself, putting fresh thermal paste, using a spatula to spread out the thermal paste evenly. Now connecting the 2 connectors, one for the MSI logo and one for the fans. Once completed, I screwed down the 4 screws, attaches the GPU to the heatsink. Moving on to the backplate of the GPU, there are 8 screws that we need to screw down in order for the backplate to be attached to the GPU itself. After doing so, the graphics card is ready to go. I just started rerouting the fan cables, give it a more pleasant, clean look. Now moving on to the power supply, starting with the power supply fan and the fan shroud. After doing so, sliding the power supply cover on top of the power supply, and finally screwing those last 4 screws that attach the power supply cover to the actual power supply. After bringing back the case from the washing process, it is now completed. All we have to do now is reassemble the case, starting by wiping down the case, just in case there was any dust that stuck itself to the case while it was drying outside. Bringing in the I/O ports of the case, lining it up with the screw holes, bringing in the front case fan, and after putting the filter light on top of it, sliding in the CD drive and following with the front panel, bringing in the screws that keeps the CD drive in place. And after doing so, bringing the last case fan, which was attached as an exhaust fan in the back, and finally bringing in the side panel, sliding them into place, then screwing them. Everything put the case together, the power supply and the GPU. If you guys did enjoy the video, please like and subscribe and comment down below. I'll be replying to every single comment. And if you do like this new approach of videos, please, let me know in the comments. Rather than cramping everything into one video, I decided to make them in different series. Maybe you enjoy this and the other one enjoy that. So let me know how that went.